Today is the 16th of October, and we are exactly 3 weeks from finding out what the American people are going to do when they go to the ballot box 3 weeks from now, or when the elections are done. A lot of places there, the elections are, the early voting begins and the mail-in ballots begin. But we will know sometime after November 6th. This is Paul Glumaz, many decade veteran political activist with Lyndon LaRouche and the LaRouche movement. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. So we are on the eve of something. We are on the eve of something momentous. It could be something, it could be a breakthrough towards a better world, or it could be the thing that brings upon destruction to the United States and the world. The midterm elections have become a global event, not a U.S. event. The midterm elections have become not a political party event, but a vote on whether Donald Trump will continue to consolidate or will be consolidating a government, or whether he will at best have no government, where the Congress shuts down everything, or we will have the beginnings of a total revolution in breaking up the control over the United States that has increasingly existed since the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and the death of John F. Kennedy. There is an institutional structure embedded, which is extremely corrupt, and it is part of a global system, a financial system. Right now, the international bankers are saying that the collapse of the financial system, the IMF had its meeting in Bali. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, had its meeting in Bali, Indonesia. And they're saying that populism is the thing that's going to collapse the financial system. And that's true, in a sense, because populism is on the rise against the financial system. And it's populism which is going to refuse to accept the conditions of austerity being imposed on countries by the international financial system as a way of sustaining the bankrupt system. This is the fight that's now going on in Italy. So populism, and they've characterized Donald Trump as a populism person. The new government of Italy is a populism person. The Bavarian elections, the ruling party got less than a majority. First time in 50 years, 50, 60 years. First time in 60 years. The ruling party, the Christian Socialist Union, and they're claiming it's populism that caused this. And populism is also eroding the power of the French president, and eroding the power of Theresa May in Great Britain. And populism is spreading around the world, but that doesn't mean that it's going to come up with the right policies. But it is the case that you're seeing a global sweep opposing the system that has governed the world. And that is occurring at the same time that a new system, in its nascent form, is emerging around Asia and the Belt and Road. which is coming into Europe, increasing, and as it comes into, as people become more aware of it, as people become more knowledgeable of what the potential is, it is causing a beginning of an increase of optimism. There's already beginning to be an increase of optimism in Africa, and there's the current Italian government is for the first time becoming a popular government. This is very rare for Italy, and the African countries of the Lake Chad Basin just signed a memorandum of understanding with the Italian government for developing Trans-Aqua. And Global Times of China said it was the Schiller Institute and the LaRouche movement that got the government of China, the government of Italy, and the African nations together about moving towards building the largest water infrastructure project in the human race, the Trans-Aqua, which brings the water from the Congo area north. So this is bringing optimism. This is bringing optimism. And to some degree, you have a similar optimism emerging in the United States around what Donald Trump has been trying to do, get an increase of jobs, get an increase in economic activity, creating a certain optimism about the future. And it's a very bad situation in the United States in many ways. But there is an increase in employment. There is an increase in manufacturing jobs. It's very small relative to what it has to be. But this optimism is causing the media and the opponents of Trump to try to drown it out with every kind of attack you can imagine. And because once something like optimism has become contagious around a president, then people will people who never voted for before will come out to the polls. People that hardly voted will come out to the polls because they see something, they see some kind of future in their voting activity, in actually doing something. And this is the imponderable, unknowable factor in the midterm elections, is that it's not known what kind of optimism has creeped into the body and the pores of the population of the people who never really thought that voting meant anything, etc. So this is what the nervousness of the institutions, the nervousness of the British, the nervousness of the jitteriness. The pollsters have been saying the Democrats are going to take the Congress, and now they're not so sure. But this is what's causing also Trump to have these huge rallies, 90,000 people rallies. He's having 2 of these a week, and on Monday he's going to be in Houston at an arena, and this arena is in the district of that Keisha Rogers is running against Al Green, the leader of the impeachment movement. So Trump is coming to the district of the leader of the impeachment movement, which is a very heavily African American area in Houston. And this is the area where he's going to have an event, and of course we're going to be there to get out the leaflet on Keisha's campaign. And Keisha's campaign is key. As an independent, she's running against impeachment. She's running against the corruption of Al Green, and against the corruption that's happened in general to these elected officials. And so, and then there's an African American candidate for Senate, John James in Michigan, who's running against Stabenow, and Trump is today tweeted about him, and his campaign is surging, and he's running against both parties. He is an anti-both parties Republican candidate on the ballot in the state of Michigan, and he stands a good chance of knocking out the long-term Democrat Stabenow. And why is that important? Because he's attacking both parties, and this would be the first major senator who has an orientation towards economic development, is not green, has an orientation to the kind of policies that we represent, and we've had a very good dialogue with John James, and so we don't know how this is all going to go, but we're looking at a very profound situation. Now, in that context, the British are going berserk. They have launched a number of attacks. Perhaps one of the major flanks that they're moving on, it appears around this Washington Post reporter, the Saudi Khashoggi, who is close to who was close to the head of Saudi intelligence, Turkey. And it appears that it appears that the Saudi government, the Saudi royal family, or MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the young guy that's taking power there in his 30s, who has a plan to transform Saudi Arabia, modernize Saudi Arabia by 2030. It appears that the British have lost control to some degree over Saudi Arabia, and they're going to try to use this Khashoggi business to try to create destabilization in Saudi Arabia, because they don't need Saudi Arabia if Saudi Arabia is going to break with them. So the international situation is that whole chunks of the empire are starting to break. So then, the other major offensive that's being launched is the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve, early on in the Trump administration, had made it very clear that they are opposed to any kind of infrastructure program. They're opposed to it, and the reason they're opposed to it is for many reasons. It threatens their control. They're also opposed to it because the demands of the international financial system for bailing out the financial system requires that you do not divert any funds, that you maintain the austerity, that all funds go to the financial system. They don't go to the real economy. So they are very much opposed to any kind of growth policy, any kind of economic development policy. And the Federal Reserve is coordinating with the rest of the similar institutions around the world to keep the thing from blowing out. Now, the Federal Reserve has been raising the interest rates, and in this context, the raising of the interest rates is simultaneously an attempt to destroy Donald Trump by collapsing whatever small gains he's made, whatever gains he's made in the economy since he's president. But even more so, it's a direct attack on what they call the emerging market nations. These are nations like Indonesia, Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, Pakistan, to some degree India, Malaysia. These are countries which are in the process of, in one way or another, of beginning to come into the Belt and Road. And these are countries where they were paying higher interest rates on investments, international investments. So by raising the interest rates, you collapse the funds flowing into these countries, and you get what they call a reverse carry trade. A carry trade is where you take a money from a low interest area and you invest it in a higher interest rate area, and you convert it into that country, and then you take it back out and reconvert it. It's called the carry trade, and the profit is made in the fact that you're borrowing the money at lower interest rates, you're investing it at higher interest rates, and significantly higher interest rates in these emerging markets, and the emerging markets are putting these funds to work. Now there's a reverse, which is causing a severe crisis in the currencies and what have you of these countries. And so this is also an attack on the ability to have the economic stability for the Belt and Road. Now what happens in that situation, and Russia is also another country that has been hit by this, is that these countries are now having to consider what are called capital controls, where you don't have a free exchange of dollars with their currency, but rather the currency remains in the country. It is not converted to the currency of the dollar, and the dollar can only come in and convert to the currency of the country under specified circumstances. It's called currency control. It's called capital controls, the control by governments of the flow of capital. There's all kinds of capital controls, and now the temptation among these countries, as is necessary, is to set up capital controls. However, once they do that, the hue and cry of the human rights mafia and the international financial community is that they are totalitarian governments now. They're not for the free flow of capital. And then you get massive punishment attacking those countries in one form or another. So there's a declaration of war on their currencies. There's a declaration of war, and then in that context, the question is, how do you deal with that? If you go off the dollar system on which the whole thing works, this offshore dollar system. So now you're talking about currency swaps and all of that. That's not a good way to go, because it creates a massive disruption in the country and in the world. So the way out is for a new agreement between nations, such that you don't have a financial speculative system, but you have fixed exchange rates. Then countries can trade, and they can trade based upon what they need and what the other countries need, and you don't have this financial speculation controlling and penalizing and plundering all these countries. Now, what Donald Trump has done with all these tariffs is that he's acted in a manner, rightly or wrongly, in opposition to this financial system. He's operated against the WTO, which is part of the financial system. He's operating against that whole system in principle. And the Chinese are split on this, because on the one hand, they have internally, they have their own controls. They're not controlled by the international banks. The Belt and Road is not controlled by the international banks, but they have made accommodations to doing business in the system. You know, they are making profits off the trade, but also so are Western companies that are in China and so forth. So what's happened is that they're like they don't know where this is going. They don't know what Trump intends to do, where he intends to take this. But what Trump has done is, by all these tariffs and it's the new agreement with Mexico and Canada, what Trump has done is he's disrupted the whole world system, financial. He's disrupted the whole thing. But yet there's no alternative that he's proposing to replace the entire system. He's not saying he's replacing the entire system, but his actions indicate that ultimately you're going to have to replace the entire system. And people who have profited from that system are going to resist it happening. They may know that it's a corrupt system. They may know that it's destructive. They know that it's genocidal. But for them, it's the way they sustain themselves, and and it's profitable for them because they've adjusted to that system. So this is the issue that we're now facing, and we're increasingly coming into that boundary where the central bankers of the world are not, and the international financial system is not going to be held together for much longer. So it begs the question of what are you going to replace it with, and that's now being discussed in a much more open way than it's ever been before. Now take the situation in Italy. The coalition government, five-star Lega Nord, intended to make Paolo Savona the finance minister. But there was such a hue and cry against him because he was associated with an anti-European position, although he was a one-time pro-Euro. But he's also been on the podium with our speakers. He knows us, we know him. He's not a supporter of ours, but he is a respected economist. And so he was sent into the parliament to present the budget. And what the Italians have done is they stuck it to the European Union. They said, we're going to have this budget deficit, which is a complete violation of European law, EU law, because they had made an agreement to roll over the debt by enforcing austerity, and through the enforcement of austerity have a certain budget surplus. And what they're saying is, no, we're going to have a budget deficit, and if we get fined for it, fine. But we're going to have a budget deficit. We're going to defend the people. We're going to go with, and then he used the term Franklin Delano Roosevelt New Deal. We're going to develop the South from the North. We're going to bring the North and South together in harmony. The North of Italy and the South of Italy. He had a standing ovation in the parliament. This is a defiance. This is begging a new system. Okay. Now, Donald Trump did something very courageous, something that I would have tremendous trepidation about doing. He went on 60 Minutes and allowed himself to be confronted by Leslie Stahl, one of the best and toughest interviewers you'll ever find. Very few people can match her. And she went after Trump in her immutable way. And, Donald Trump, completely unflappable. And I mean, she went after him hard. And at a certain point, she asked him if he would pledge not to shut down the Mueller investigation. And she kept insisting, and he said, pledge? To you? And a little later on he said, I'm the president, you're not. And the whole manner in which he carried this out, and when the whole thing about about the Western system, our allies and our traditional system that's we've had for 70 years and kept the peace, he says, you don't know that. And then when he said, well, what about our European allies? The European Union is not our ally. The European Union has done more to screw us than anybody else, and they were created to screw us. And so this guy did an excellent, Trump, and she interrupted him at every point, and he was able to interrupt her interruption in a very simple, in a very kind of time, very almost you couldn't tell how it was seamless. I've never seen somebody interrupted so much and yet instantly responds and to turn it into a seamless dialogue. I've never seen anything like this. It was quite amazing. So obviously Trump is sensing that the population is shifting towards his position, and so then we come to this whole question of the declassification, and what's now come out is that the FBI had exculpatory evidence that they withheld from the FISA judge, and this is huge. and that exculpatory evidence involves the British. And it turns out that exculpatory evidence and other evidence will point to the fact that the FBI and CIA director John Brennan got the MI6 to spy on the U.S. citizens, and it's on the basis of that all of this happened. So this whole thing could blow, and it could. The whole thing is criminal. The whole Mueller thing is criminal. The whole thing is full of criminal intent, criminal aspects, breaking the law, and this could blow. And Donald Trump is going to either blow it or not, but he's going to choose the time. And he made it very clear when to Leslie Stahl, and that when she brought up Mattis, had said something about, we need NATO, we need all of this for the Western Alliance. Do you agree with what Mattis said? And he says, I know more about those things than Mattis. And and he implied that Mattis could go, Mattis could stay. Not everybody stays forever. That Mattis is a Democrat. And he made it very clear that none of his cabinet officials are sacred. They could go, they could come, other people could come in, and I'm in charge. I am the president. I'm in charge. I can do that. And so this is really, this is Trump demonstrating that he is in command of the situation, and telegraphing that to not only the people of the United States but also the people to the world. And that's very important, because a lot of the problems that Trump has had has been nobody's taking him seriously because they don't think he's going to last, or all this crap has been going on, or everybody's against him, or what have you. There were a lot of other things, but if you watch it, you'll be quite surprised at how well he did.